The Galactic Council chamber was silent. This room was usually full of loud voices and bright lights. Now it was dark and cold. High Chancellor Vrel looked at the giant screen in the middle of the room. The screen showed a map of the stars. Most of the stars were turning red. Red meant they were gone. The swarm had taken them. The swarm was not a person or a nation. It was a cloud of metal and hunger. They came from the dark space. Between galaxies, they did not talk. They did not trade. They only ate. They ate planets for minerals and stars for energy. For 10 years, the best empires in the galaxy fought them. The Xylos used their lasers, the Brak used their heavy shields, the Xanth used their mind powers. All of them failed. We are losing, Vrel said. His voice was small. He looked at the other leaders. Swarm will reach the core worlds in 3 months. If they take the core, the galaxy dies. What about the newcomers? Asked General Cax. He was a brave soldier, but even he looked tired. The ones from the far edge of the Orion Arm, the humans. Vrel sighed. We sent a message to Earth. We asked for their entire fleet. We told them we needed every ship, every soldier, and every bomb they had. We offered them gold, technology, and a seat on the council. And Cax leaned forward. They sent a reply. This morning, Vrel said. He pressed a button. A short text appeared. On the screen it said, "Message received. Help is on the way. We are sending the ISS Deliverance. Good luck." The room exploded with angry voices. One ship. Cax yelled. The swarm has millions of ships. Each one is the size of a city. One human ship is an insult. They are laughing at us while we die. Maybe they don't understand the danger. Someone suggested, they understand. Vrel said sadly, they just sent one ship. That is all they are giving us. Far away in the cold void of space, a single ship moved. It was not pretty. It was not shiny like the Xylo ships or elegant like the Xanth cruisers. It was a long gray box of metal. It looked like a brick made of iron and anger. On its side, white letters spelled out ISS Deliverance. Inside the ship, Captain Elias Thorne sat in his chair. He was drinking coffee from a stained mug. He was an older man with gray hair and scars on his hands. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a tired mechanic. Captain, a voice said. It was Sarah, the ship's pilot. We are coming out of warp near the Thalex system. The swarm is already there. The Thalex fleet is almost gone. Thorne nodded. He took a sip of his coffee. Status of the main gun. Charged to 100%, sir, Sarah replied. Shields, standard human plating. It won't stop a direct hit from a swarm beam, but it will keep the air in for a bit. Thorne looked at the screen. Thousands of swarm ships were surrounding the last Thalex planet. The planet was beautiful and green, but the swarm was already digging into its crust. They asked for a fleet, Thorne whispered to himself, but they don't know us yet. They don't know what one human ship can do when it has nothing left to lose. He put his coffee down, opened the vents, warm up the engines, tell the Thalex to get out of the way. We're coming through. The ISS Deliverance didn't glow. It didn't make a fancy sound. It simply accelerated. It moved toward the millions of enemy ships like a pebble being thrown at a mountain. To the galaxy it looked like suicide. To the humans it was just another day at work. The swarm noticed the new ship. A few small swarm scouts turned to meet it. They fired green beams of energy. The Deliverance didn't dodge. The beams hit the thick metal hull and bounced off, leaving black marks. The human ship kept coming. Target the lead swarm hive ship, Thorn ordered. I want to see if their hearts are as hard as their shells. The front of the Deliverance opened up. A long dark barrel slid out. This wasn't a laser or a plasma bolt. Humans didn't like light shows, they liked physics. Inside the ship, huge magnets began to hum. A solid slug of tungsten, heavy as a building, was loaded into the chamber. Fire, Thorn said. There was no sound in space, but inside the ship everything shook. The tungsten slug left the ship at a fraction of the speed of light. It traveled the distance between the ships in a heartbeat. It hit the swarm hive ship right in the center. The hive ship didn't explode like a bomb. It shattered like glass. The force was so great that the metal of the enemy ship turned into dust instantly. The slug didn't stop. It went through the first ship, hit a second ship behind it, and kept going into the dark. For the first time in 10 years, the swarm stopped moving. They were confused. Reload, Thorn said, picking up his coffee again. We have a lot of work to do. The bridge of the ISS Deliverance was a place of quiet focus, while the rest of the galaxy used computers that talked or holograms that glowed with every color. The humans used buttons, levers, and flat screens. To an alien it looked like a museum. To Captain Thorn it was a cockpit built for survival. The swarm is reacting, sir, Sarah said. Her hands moved quickly over her console. They are turning away from the planet. 300 ships are moving to intercept us. Mostly light attackers and a few mid-size cruisers. Thorn looked at the radar. The screen was filled with red dots. Each dot was a ship that had destroyed entire cities. They think we are just one ship. They think if they surround us, we will die. They are right about the surrounding part, but they are wrong about the dying, sir. The Thalex Admiral is trying to call us. The communications officer Miller shouted over the hum of the engines. Put him through, Thorn said. A holographic window appeared. It was small and shaky. The Thalex Admiral looked like a large blue scaled lizard. He was bleeding from a wound on his shoulder, and his bridge was filled with smoke. Human, the Admiral hissed. What are you doing? You have killed one hive ship, but you have drawn their attention to you. You cannot survive. 300 ships. Turn around, run. We will try to cover you while we die. Thorn smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a hunter. Admiral, with all due respect, stay out of the way. You're blocking my line of fire. If you want to help, pick up your survivors. Will handle the rest. You are insane, the Admiral screamed before the connection cut out. He's probably right, Thorn whispered. Sarah, full thrusters, head straight for the middle of their formation. Miller, activate the Porcupine defense system. Deliverance groaned as its engines pushed it forward. Usually a ship would try to stay far away and fire from a distance. The Deliverance did the opposite. It dove into the middle of the red dots. The swarm attackers fired. Thousands of green energy bolts hit the human ship. The hull turned red hot. Temperature inside the bridge began to rise. Shields at 40%, Sarah reported. Hull integrity holding at 80. Wait for it, Thorn said, watching the distance markers. Wait now. from every inch of the Deliverance's hull small hatches opened. These weren't cannons, they were thousands of small tubes. In an instant they fired. But they didn't fire at the swarm, they fired a cloud of metal dust and tiny ball bearings into the space around the ship. To the swarm this looked like trash. But the Deliverance was moving at incredible speed. In space, speed turns trash into a weapon. The swarm ships were also moving fast. When the swarm ships hit the cloud of metal dust, it was like hitting a wall of diamonds. The tiny ball bearings tore through the swarm's thin shields. The metal dust got sucked into their engines. Within seconds, 50 swarm attackers were spinning out of control. Their hulls turned into Swiss cheese. The porcupine works every time, Miller laughed. Don't get happy yet, Thorne warned. The cruisers are coming. They have heavy armor, 2 large swarm cruisers, each 3 times the size of the Deliverance, closed in from both sides. They fired heavy beams of white light. The Deliverance shook violently. Lights flickered and a pipe burst in the back of the bridge, filling the air with steam. Engineering says we're taking water damage in the cooling system. Sarah shouted, if we take another hit like that, the engines will melt. We don't need the engines for this. Next part, Thorne said. Targeting computer, lock onto the cruiser on the left. Give me the hammer. Sequencer. The Deliverance stopped its forward movement. It turned sharply. The side of the ship opened up, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a massive missile. It wasn't a nuclear bomb. It was something humans had invented for mining asteroids. It was a gravity bomb. Fire. The missile drifted out slowly. It didn't have a loud engine. It just floated toward the swarm cruiser. The swarm ignored it, thinking it was a piece of the ship that had fallen off. When the missile hit the side of the freight swarm cruiser, there was no fire. Instead, there was a flash of purple light. For a split second, a tiny black hole was created inside the enemy ship. The physics of the cruiser broke. The front of the ship was pulled into the back. The metal twisted and screamed as the entire cruiser was crushed into a ball the size of a car. The second swarm cruiser tried to turn away, but the gravity shockwave hit it, knocking out its power. Finish it with the railgun, Thorne ordered. The magnets hummed again. Thump. Another tungsten slug flew through space. It hit the disabled cruiser and tore it in half. On the planet below, the Thalex people looked up at the sky. They saw the flashes of light. They saw the giant enemy ships falling apart. For the first time in weeks, they stopped running toward the bunkers. They stood and watched. In the Galactic Council chamber, Vrel and the others watched the feed from a distant satellite. They were speechless. One ship was doing what their entire fleets could not. How? Vrel whispered. How is a single ship doing this? Because Kak said, his voice full of awe, the humans didn't build a ship to fight a war. They built a ship to survive one. Look at it. It's not a weapon. It's a stubborn piece of iron that refuses to break. Inside the Deliverance, Thorne was out of his chair. He was helping Miller fix the broken pipe. Get the tape, Miller. The heavy-duty stuff. Captain, the swarm is retreating from the planet. Sarah yelled. They are calling for reinforcements. Hive Mother is coming. That's a capital ship, sir. It's 50 km long. Thorne wiped grease from his forehead. 50 km. Good, it'll be hard to miss. Tell the Crew to get some food. The real fight is about to start. The void of space was no longer empty. It was filled with the wreckage of swarm ships, but the victory felt small. On the long-range sensors, a massive shadow appeared. It was the hive mother. It looked like a dark, jagged moon made of organic bone and black metal. It was so big that it had its own gravity. Inside the ISS Deliverance, the alarms were constant. The red emergency lights flashed, making the gray walls look like they were bleeding. Captain, the hive mother has entered the system, Sarah reported. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. It's launching thousands of drones. They aren't ships, sir. They are boarding pods. They want to get inside. Thorne looked at the giant shadow on the screen. They realize they can't break us from the outside, so they want to eat us from the inside. Typical. He turned to Miller. Signal the Thalex Admiral again. Tell him to get his remaining ships behind the moon. He needs to stay alive to tell the Forsyth story. Sir, the Admiral says he won't leave us, Miller replied. He says the humans have earned his blood. Thorne grunted. Tell him to shut up and do what I say. If he wants to help, he can cover our retreat if things go south. But for now, we're going into the belly of the beast. The Deliverance accelerated instead of flying away from the massive hive mother. It flew straight toward the center of the giant ship. The hive mother opened its mouth, a huge landing bay meant for swallowing whole cruisers. Brace for impact, Thorne yelled. The human ship slammed through the swarm's energy shield. The vibration was so strong that several screens cracked. The ship slid across the metal floor of the swarm's interior docking bay, sparks flying everywhere. With a loud crash, the Deliverance came to a stop inside the enemy stronghold. Silence followed, then the sound of scratching began. Thousands of swarm soldiers, insect-like creatures with blades for arms, were crawling over the hull of the Deliverance. Seal the inner bulkheads, Thorne ordered. He stood up and walked to a locker at the back of the bridge. He pulled out a heavy shotgun. It was old, mechanical, and very loud. Miller, Sarah, grab your gear. We're going to the engine room. We're leaving the bridge, Sarah asked, grabbing a pistol. Bridge is just a room, Thorne said. The engine is the heart. If they take the engine, we die. Plus, I left the remote detonator for the main reactor back there. The crew moved through the narrow hallways of the ship. The walls were shaking. The swarm was using acid to melt through the outer hull. Suddenly, the metal ceiling above them tore open. A swarm soldier dropped down. It was 6 ft tall with 4 red eyes and teeth like needles. Before it could scream, Thorne fired his shotgun. The sound was deafening in the small hallway. The alien was thrown back into the hole it came from. Keep moving, Thorne shouted. They reached the engine room. It was a massive chamber filled with the roar of the fusion reactor. The chief engineer, a woman named Kowalski, was already there. She was holding a welding torch in one hand and a rifle in the other. Captain, they're at the doors, she yelled. How long until the gift is ready, Kowalski? Thorne asked. 10 minutes, sir. But we need to stay connected to the hive mother's internal network for the virus to upload. The gift was not a bomb. It was a digital plague. Humans were famous for their computer hackers. They had realized that the swarm ships were all connected to a single hive mind. If they could upload a piece of junk code into the hive mother, it would spread to every ship in the fleet, telling their life support systems to shut down. The heavy steel doors of the engine room began to bulge. The swarm was pushing from the other side. "Hold the line," Thorn cried. The doors burst open, a flood of black clicking monsters poured in. The humans didn't have energy shields or plasma swords. They had lead bullets and fire. They fought with a desperation that the swarm had never seen. Humans didn't fight for glory, they fought because they were angry. Thorn fired until his gun was empty, then used the metal stock of the weapon to bash an alien's head. Sarah and Miller stood back to back, firing into the darkness. Upload at 90%. Kowalski screamed over the noise of the gunfire. The hive mother began to shake. It realized something was wrong. The lights inside the alien ship started to flicker. The swarm soldiers stopped fighting for a second, looking confused. Their connection to the mother was glitching. 95, 99. Done. Thorn grabbed a radio. "Bridge, if anyone is left up there, get us out of here." The deliverance's automated systems kicked in. The engines roared to life inside the enemy bay. The ship didn't wait for the doors to open. It used its railgun to blast a hole in the side of the hive mother and flew out into the cold vacuum of space. Behind them, the hive mother started to drift. Its lights went out. Thousands of smaller ships surrounding it stopped moving. They were like puppets with their strings cut. "Did we win?" Miller asked, leaning against the wall covered in blue alien blood. Thorn looked at the screen. The massive hive mother was cold and dead. "We won this round, but look at the long-range scan. On the map, more red dots were appearing, hundreds of them. The swarm had sent a fleet to this system, but they had millions more across the galaxy. They're coming for us," Sarah said. "The whole galaxy is watching. They saw us kill a hive mother." "Good," Thorn said, sitting on a crate. "Let them come. They think we sent a fleet and we're down to one ship. They don't realize we only needed one." He looked at his crew. They were tired, hurt and scared, but they were humans. And humans were the most stubborn things in the universe. The victory at the Thalek system sent a shockwave through the galaxy. On thousands of planets, alien races watched the footage of the gray human brick tearing through a hive mother. Hope is a dangerous thing. It makes people stand up when they should be hiding. But for the crew of the ISS Deliverance, there was no time for celebrations. The ship was in bad shape. Smoke hung in the hallways, and the outer hull was covered in first scars and deep gouges from swarm acid. "Captain, we have a problem," Kowalski said, wiping oil from her face. She was standing in the middle of the engineering bay, surrounded by dismantled machinery. The main railgun is jammed. The heat from the last 3 shots fused the loading mechanism and our fusion core. It's leaking radiation. We can't jump to warp. Thorn leaned against a bulkhead. He felt every year of his age. "Can you fix it?" "I need a dry dock in a week," she replied. "I have a hammer in 10 minutes. I can make it move, but I can't make it fight like it did before." "Do what you can," Thorn said. He walked back to the bridge. On the main screen, the Thelix Admiral's face appeared again. This time he wasn't screaming. He looked humbled. "Captain Thorn, my people are safe because of you." My engineers are heading to your position with supplies. We owe you our lives. Keep your supplies. Admiral Thorne said, I need your scanners. Where is the rest of the swarm? The Admiral's expression darkened. They are gathering. They realize that you are the only thing standing in their way. They have stopped attacking other sectors. 5 hive mothers and 10,000 support ships are heading toward the Creos. Nebula, they are going to jump to Earth. Captain, they want to destroy your home. To prove a point, the bridge went silent. Earth, the blue marble, the place where everyone on the Deliverance had a family, a memory, or a dream. They're bypassing the Council fleets. Miller asked, his voice cracking. The Council fleets are broken, the Admiral said sadly. The swarm doesn't care about us anymore. They see you as the only real threat. If they destroy Earth, the galaxy will give. Thorne looked at his crew. Sarah was staring at a photo of a small house in a green valley taped to her console. Miller was clutching a necklace. How long until they reach the jump point? Thorne asked. 6 hours, the Admiral replied. Even if your ship was perfect, you couldn't stop 5 hive mothers. Thorne stood up straight. The tiredness seemed to vanish, replaced by a cold, hard focus. Admiral, I need you to send a message to every ship in the galaxy, every merchant vessel, every scout, every old rusted freighter. Tell them the humans are making a stand at the Creos Nebula. Tell them we aren't asking for help, we're asking them to watch. Watch. Watch what? Watch what happens when you push a human into a corner, Thorne said. Sarah, plot a course for the Creos. Nebula, use the emergency thrusters if you have to. We're going to meet them. The Deliverance limped through space. It looked like a dying animal, but its heart was still beating as they approached the nebula, a beautiful cloud of purple and gold gas. The sensors began to scream. The swarm was already there. It was a wall of black metal. 5 hive mothers sat at the center of a massive circle of ships. It looked like a dark crown in the middle of the stars. They were preparing their jump drives. The space around them was beginning to warp. They haven't seen us yet, Sarah whispered. We're hiding in the nebula's interference. Good, Thorne said. Kowalski, status on the last resort. Over the comms, Kowalski's voice was quiet. It's ready, sir. But you know what it means. There's no coming back from this. I know, Thorne said. The last resort wasn't a weapon they had brought with them. It was the ship itself. The ISS Deliverance was powered by an experimental singularity engine. If the safety limiters were removed and the engine was overloaded, it wouldn't just explode. It would create a localized collapse of space-time. It would pull everything within 10,000 kilometers into a void. Captain Mill said, looking at his screen. I'm picking up signatures, thousands of them. They swarm. No, sir. Miller's eyes widened. It's everyone. Look. Out of the darkness of the nebula, ships began to appear. They weren't warships. There were Thelix mining barges, Xylos, transport ships, Zenth pleasure yachts, and even small one-man scout ships from races Thorne had never heard of. They didn't have big guns. They didn't have shields, but they were there. They came. Sarah breathed. Thousands of alien ships formed a line behind the battered human warship. They weren't there to fight. They were there to stand with the ship. That had given them hope. Thorne opened a wide channel broadcast. This is Captain Elias Thorne of the ISS Deliverance. To the swarm. You came here to find a fleet. You found a galaxy. You want Earth. You have to go through us first. The swarm fleet turned. 5 hive mothers began to glow with a terrifying green light. They were charging their main weapons. All ships full power to forward. Thrusters. Thorn commanded, we don't need to win, we just need to hold them long enough for the engine to peak. The Deliverance charged. Behind it the ragtag fleet of the galaxy followed. It was a charge of the brave and the broken. Lasers and plasma bolts lit up the nebula like 1,000 suns. 30 seconds to engine overload. Kowalski shouted. Thorn sat in his chair. He picked up his coffee mug. It was empty. It's been an honor. Everyone. The screen turned white. The white light did not bring death. Instead it brought a silence so deep it felt heavy. For several seconds, no one on the bridge of the Deliverance could see or hear. Then slowly the world returned. The screen flickered back to life. The Creo's nebula was gone. In its place was a massive swirling hole in the fabric of space. The 5 hive mothers were nowhere to be seen. They hadn't been destroyed by fire. They had been pulled into the void created by the singularity engine, but the Deliverance was still their report. Thorn coughed, waving away the smoke. Sir. The engine, Sarah gasped, looking at her flickering monitors. It didn't explode. When the other ships, the alien ships, approached us, their combined energy fields created a feedback loop. It stabilized our singularity. It pushed the blast outward away from us and toward the swarm. Thorn looked out the viewport. Thousands of alien ships were still there. They were battered, many with hulls glowing from the heat, but they were standing. The swarm fleet was in ruins. Without their hive mothers to guide them, the remaining smaller ships were crashing into each other or flying blindly into the dark. The swarm is retreating, Miller whispered, tears running down his face. They're actually leaving. The radio erupted. It wasn't just the Thelix Admiral this time. Hundreds of voices in dozens of languages were cheering. The sound was a chaotic, beautiful symphony of victory. Captain Thorn. A voice came through the noise. It was High Chancellor Vrel from the Galactic Council. He wasn't in his dark chamber anymore. He was standing on a balcony on the core world, looking at the stars. The galaxy saw every planet, every citizen. They saw one ship refused to move. And they saw what happens when we stand together. Thorn leaned back in his chair. His hand reached for his coffee mug, but it had shattered during the blast. He smiled anyway. It wasn't just one ship, Chancellor. It was a start. 1 year later, the Galactic Council chamber was bright again, but it looked different. There were no longer high walls separating the leaders. In the center of the room stood a new statue. It wasn't a statue of a great king or a god. It was a statue of a simple gray rectangular ship, the ISS Deliverance. Humanity didn't take the gold or the seats of power the council offered as a reward. Instead, they asked for something else, an open trade route, and a promise that no world would ever have to face a threat alone again. The Deliverance itself was retired. It was now a museum orbiting Earth. Captain Thorn, now retired to a small farm in a green valley, often looked up at the night sky. He knew the swarm was still out there in the deep dark. He knew that one day another threat might come, but he wasn't worried. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson the humans had to teach. It wasn't about the size of the guns or the strength of the shields. It was about the fact that no matter how big the enemy is, they can be beaten if you are simply too stubborn to lose. In the Orion Arm, a single ship had started a war, but a single spirit had finished it. And for the first time in a billion years, the stars felt safe. Humanity hadn't just sent a warship. They had sent a message, and the universe had finally. I listened. The war was over, but the peace was loud. The great silence that followed the disappearance of the hive mothers didn't last long. Soon the galaxy was filled with the sound of reconstruction, but for some, the end of the war was just the beginning of a new mystery. Deep within the wreckage of the Creo's Nebula, a small scout ship named the Starseeker was picking through the bones of a dead swarm cruiser. The pilot, a young Xylos named Kiri, was looking for tech to salvage. "Captain, I'm picking up a signal," Kiri said, her 4 eyes blinking at the sensor screen. "It's not swarm and it's not council. It's pulsing like a heartbeat." The captain of the Starseeker, an old human veteran named Miller, the same Miller who had served on the Deliverance, leaned over her shoulder. He had a mechanical arm now, a gift from the Thalic surgeons. "Show me." The screen zoomed in on a small black sphere floating in the middle of a debris field. It was perfectly smooth, reflecting the purple light of the nebula. It looked like a drop of oil in water. "That shouldn't be there," Miller whispered. "The singularity should have swallowed everything." As they watched, the sphere began to unfold. It didn't open like a door. It unfolded like paper. Within seconds, it had transformed into a small, elegant probe. It sent out a burst of light that scanned the star Seeker. On the bridge, the speakers crackled. Voice clear and cold, spoken perfect English. "Evaluation complete. Species human. Status defiant. The experiment has reached stage 2. Experiment." Miller grabbed the radio. "Who is this? Identify yourself." Probe didn't answer. Instead, it projected a map into the air. It wasn't a map of the galaxy they knew. It was a map of the entire universe, and it was covered in red dots, thousands of times more dots than the swarm had ever shown. The swarm was not a storm, the voice said. The swarm was a test, a gardener's tool to see which weeds would survive the winter. You survived. Now you must meet the gardener. The probe vanished into a flash of light, leaving the crew of the Starseeker in total darkness. Back on Earth, the news reached the United Earth Command. Admiral Thorne, now a legend, was pulled out of his peaceful retirement. He stood in the high-tech war room looking at the data Miller had sent back. "They're saying we were tested," Thorne said to the room full of generals. "They're saying the most terrifying enemy we ever faced was just a tool to see if we were worth talking to." "What do we do, sir?" a young officer asked. "We just finished rebuilding. Our fleet is still small. We only have the one warship style that works." Thorne looked at the map of the universe. He thought about the Deliverance, about the cold coffee, and about the way the galaxy had stood together in the nebula. "We do what humans do best," Thorne said. "We don't wait for them to come to us. If there's a gardener out there who thinks they can play with our lives like weeds, we're going to go find them, and we're going to show them that this garden belongs to us." He tapped a button on the table. "Start the Shipyards. I want 10 more ships like the Deliverance, no, make it 20, and this time we're not just sending them to help, we're sending them to explore. The galaxy had spent millions of years being afraid of the dark, but the humans had shown them that if you carry a big enough light and a big enough gun, the dark isn't so scary anymore. The era of the Great War was over. The era of the Great Discovery had begun, and leading the way once again would be the gray, stubborn bricks of Earth. The discovery of the Gardner probe changed everything. The Galactic Council was no longer just a group of survivors. They were now a group of students. Under human leadership, a new mission was formed, Project Pathfinder. The goal was to find the source of the probe and answers. But the galaxy was still scarred. Many systems were still full of swarm wreckage, and some planets were still hiding in fear. To show the universe that the era of hiding was over, the humans decided to host a summit. But this wouldn't be a summit of politicians, it would be a summit of engineers and explorers. We need a new kind of ship, Thorne said, looking at the blueprints in the Earth Command headquarters. The Deliverance was a hammer. It was built to smash things. For this journey, we need a needle. Something fast, something smart, and something that can talk back. Result was the ISS Odyssey. It was sleek, unlike the Deliverance, but it still had that thick human armor. It carried the best sensors from the Zenth, the fastest engines from the Xylos, and the most advanced AI the humans had ever programmed. Odyssey's first mission was to follow the coordinates hidden in the probe's map. The coordinates led to a place called the Void of Whispers, a region of space where no stars existed. It was a hole in the universe, 500 light-years wide. Captain Miller, we are approaching the edge of the void, Kiri said from the pilot's seat. She had been promoted to the Odyssey for her bravery in finding the probe. The sensors are picking up music. It sounds like a million voices singing at once. Miller, now the commander of the most advanced ship in history, listened. The sound was haunting and beautiful. It's not music, Kiri, it's data, a lot of it. They aren't just watching us. They are recording us. Suddenly the space in front of the Odyssey began to ripple. A massive structure materialized out of the darkness. It wasn't a ship or a station. It was a ring thousands of miles wide, glowing with a soft white light. Around the ring, thousands of smaller spheres, exactly like the one they found in the nebula, were orbiting like bees around a hive. This is the garden. Voice echoed through the ship. It was the same cold, clear voice from the probe. Welcome, species 452b. Known to yourselves as humans. You have traveled far, but are you ready to see the truth of your existence? A bridge of light extended from the ring toward the Odyssey. They're inviting us in, Miller said. He looked at his crew. We didn't come this far to turn back. Prepare for docking and tell Earth. Tell them we found the library of the gods. As the Odyssey entered the ring, the crew saw things that defied logic. They saw planets suspended in glass jars. They saw stars being born in small chambers. They saw the history of 1,000 dead civilizations displayed on the walls like paintings. We are the archivists, the voice continued. We do not start wars, we simply observe the natural selection of the universe. The swarm was an apex predator we released to see which civilizations had The will to persist. Most hide, some fight and fail, you. Did something different, you fought for. Others. Miller walked toward a giant screen at the end of the hall. On it he saw a video of the deliverance. At the Krillos Nebula, he saw the alien ships joining the line. By saving yourselves, you changed the will of the galaxy, the archivist said. You broke the T experiment, and because you broke it, the experiment is over. The swarm will never return. And what happens now? Asked. Now, the archivist said, and for the first time, the voice sounded almost warm. Now you become the teachers. The galaxy is young, and it is frightened. It needs someone to show it how to be brave. It needs the humans. Miller looked out at the vast library. He realized that the war wasn't the hard part. The hard part was going to be leading galaxy that was now looking to Earth for all the answers. Kiri, Miller said into his comms, tell Admiral Thorne to cancel the 20 warships. We don't need hammers anymore. We need schools. The transition from soldiers to teachers was not as easy as Miller had hoped. While the archivists had declared the experiment over, the galaxy was still a chaotic place. The power vacuum left by the swarm had allowed smaller, greedy factions to emerge. Some alien races who had hidden during the war now came out to claim territory that didn't belong to them. On Earth, the Humanity First movement was growing. Some people argued that after saving the galaxy, humans should focus only on Earth. They didn't want to be teachers. They wanted to be kings. Admiral Thorne, now gray-haired and weary, sat in a garden in Switzerland looking at a digital tablet. It was a message from Miller. The archivists gave us the keys to the library, Thorne, but everyone else is trying to steal the books. Thorne sighed. He knew that peace was often more complicated than war. He called for a meeting of the newly formed Galactic Coalition. We are not here to rule, Thorne told the gathered leaders of 100 worlds. And we are not here to hide. We are here to build a shield, not a shield of metal, but a shield of laws. While the politicians argued, Miller and Kiri were back on the Odyssey, patrolling the edge of the Krillos Nebula. They were responding to a distress call from a small colony of refugees. A group of space pirates using scavenge swarm technology was attacking them. They think because the big war is over, there are no more rules, Kiri said, her hands flying over the weapons console. Should I warm up the rail gun, sir? Miller looked at the pirate ships. They were small, fast, and mean. No, we're not the Deliverance. We don't just smash things anymore. Open a channel. The pirate leader, a jagged-looking alien with a mechanical eye, laughed when he saw Miller's face. The great human hero. Where is your big warship? You've come in a toy ship to talk to us. We have swarm lasers now. Those aren't lasers, Miller said calmly. Those are mining tools the swarm used to cut through rock. If you fire them at your current power levels, your own reactor will explode. I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to save you from your own stupidity. Pirates didn't listen. They fired. The Odyssey didn't dodge. It didn't need to. The Xynth cloaking technology and Xylos energy dampeners made the pirate beams look like flashlights hitting a mountain. Kiri, use the electronic pulse we learned from the archivists, Miller ordered. The Odyssey emitted a soft blue wave of energy. It wasn't a bomb, it was a command. It told every computer on the pirate ships to take a nap all at once. The pirate ships went dark, no engines, no lights, no oxygen recyclers, just for a minute. That's enough, Miller said. Let them sit in the dark and think about it. When the power came back on, the pirate leader was no longer laughing. He was shaking. How did you do that? We had the technology of the gods. That's the problem, Miller replied. You have the tools, but you don't have the wisdom. That is what we are teaching now. If you want to survive in this new galaxy, you have to learn that the era of the Predator is over. Back on Earth, Thor watched the recording of the encounter. He smiled. This was the humanity he believed in. Not the one that conquered, but the one that corrected. But in the background of the archivist's library, a small light was blinking on a forgotten console. A new signal was coming from the very edge of the universe. It wasn't a heartbeat, and it wasn't music. It was a warning. Something is coming, the archivist's voice whispered into the empty halls. Something the humans weren't meant to face for another 1,000,000 years. Experiment didn't end, it just changed subjects.